Her eyes widened as he kicked off his pants and began singing at the top of his lungs. Big titty lady was not very pretty, but her bosom was big as a barn. Today I'm going to be talking about Serpent and Dove. It was one of the finalists for the Goodreads Choice Awards. It has an average rating of over 4 stars on Goodreads, but the reason why this popped up on my radar and why I wanted to read it was because I saw that it was just so contentious among the book community. I've seen positive reviews, a lot of them were 5 stars, but every now and then I would see individual 1-star reviews and say that it was problematic and terrible. I'm always super intrigued whenever books get polarizing opinions because it makes me curious which side am I going to fall on. I checked out the synopsis and it really didn't seem like it would be a bad story. If anything, it made me interested in checking it out. This is a fantasy YA story about a witch and a witch hunter who are forced to marry each other. And I was like, oh shit, like why do they have to get married? How are they going to fall for each other? You know, like I was intrigued because I like seeing two people who are on completely opposite sides learn to overcome each other's prejudice and see each other's perspective and maybe even fall in love. It's cheesy and it's cliche, but I'm trash, so I like it anyway. The book really started off fine. The main characters are kind of like the poor man's version of Nina and Matthias from Six of Crows. It was almost like the author was like, man, you know what? I really want to write about Nina and Matthias, except I want to make Nina more annoying and Matthias like 5 times more sexist, as if we didn't think that was possible. So she did. When I mentioned that I rated this book 1.5 stars, I got a comment saying, wow, I'm really surprised that you rated it so low. I thought that you would have liked it because the main guy seems to be exactly your type. Listen. You're absolutely right. And that's why I was so down for it. If you don't know my fictional taste in men, basically I am into sexually repressed buff dudes. I like the gentle giants. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just a simple hoe. They got big muscles, but their experience is so small. It's cute. It's like the juxtaposition between the hyper-masculine/buff physique of a guy paired with the timid/scared sexual repression of his personality. That's why I liked Wolf from the Lunar Chronicles. That's why I like Jericho from the Diviners. Open mind, open legs, okay? The main girl is named Lou and she's a witch. The main guy is named Reed and he is a chasseur, which is basically a witch hunter who has been sworn to the church. When it comes to the witches, I thought that the magic system was interesting, or at least the little that we got from it. There's different types of magic that the witches have, but I thought what was most interesting is that every time they use magic, they emanate a smell. I was talking about this story with my friend. When I mentioned this part, he started laughing. He was like, haha, that's so funny. The main girl must be so smelly. And I'm like, dude, grow up. The fact that they emanate smell means that they can't use magic without risking themselves to be in danger and exposing themselves to witch hunters. I like it when there's limitations or consequences to magic because it adds more depth to the story. That being said, knowing the main character, she probably is a smelly bitch, but that's just on her. I don't see that for all the other witches. When the book starts, the main girl, Lou, has fled from her coven and has gone into hiding. She's trying to disguise herself as a normal human. She hasn't been using her magic because she doesn't want to get caught, so she has resorted to stealing instead. Sometimes she pretends to be a man because that's how feminism works, so she wears like a fake mustache. She's really given like the early 2000s Tumblr girl vibes here. She gets caught by the main guy, Reed, who finds out that she's a woman and realizes that she's been stealing. She's able to escape from him, but overall, they have like a rocky start to their relationship, as most enemies to lovers do. What I thought was funny was that every time they ran into each other, no matter how infuriating the guy was to her, and no matter how much she supposedly hated him, in her POV, she still keeps on emphasizing how hot he is, and always describes his physical attributes in great detail. From the first moment they meet, it says, beyond his obscene height, the first things I noticed were the brass buttons on his coat. They matched the copper and gold of his hair, which shone in the sun like a beacon. Combined with his straight nose and full mouth, it made him unexpectedly handsome for a chasseur. Irritatingly handsome. I couldn't help but stare. Thick lashes framed eyes the precise color of the sea. Eyes that currently regarded me with unabashed shock. Shit. My hand shot to my mustache, which dangled off my face from the fall. That's how he finds out that she's a girl, because the fake mustache starts to slip off. That's how you determine gender, whether you have a mustache or not. That's why so many people on YouTube think I'm trans. His height and his buffness get mentioned so many times whenever she thinks about how much she hates him. She'll be like, man, I hated that hot piece of ass. I smashed my fist against his rippling chest muscles in annoyance. I'm like, damn, are you angry or thirsty? I guess both. Later on, they meet again in the backstage of a theater. At this point, Lou has been beaten up by some other side characters, so her face has been badly bruised. Reed recognizes her backstage, so he tries to catch her. They get into like this little kerfuffle and this fight behind the stage, and it ends up making them tumble out onto the stage with him on top of her in front of everybody. Now everyone is just fucking shook because there is this big buff dude on top of a girl who has bruises all over her face. So he looks like he was beating the shit out of her, and that ain't cool. And the archbishop, who's head of the church, is like, what do we do? This man's reputation is ruined. People are gonna question the church. Fuck the Me Too movement. What about the church? So then the archbishop is like pacing around and he's like, okay, you know what? I got this. I fucking got this, okay? I have a plan. It's the perfect solution. What we are gonna do is we are gonna marry the two of you together so that the public will understand that you were only beating her because she was being a bad wife. So then that's more justified. Captain Diggory's reputation will be ruined. I will be forced to relieve him of his duties, lest the chasseur's holiness be questioned, lest my holiness be questioned. What am I going to do with you? What am I going to do? He spun on his heel to face me, a peculiar sort of triumph in his expression. Perhaps a mutually beneficial arrangement can be made. It's quite simple, really. Marriage. As your wife, Reed, this distasteful creature would belong to you. You would have had every right to pursue her, to discipline her, especially after her indiscretions last night. It would have been expected, necessary even. There would have been no crime committed, no impurity to disparage. You would remain a chasseur. You telling me that the only reason why they have an arranged marriage is because a man is being falsely accused of assaulting a woman and now his reputation is on the line, and the only way to salvage that is to marry each other so that beating a wife is more palatable to the general public. And this is all concocted by a church that belongs to a real-world institution that has a long-standing history of enabling sexual assault and abuse. I don't know about that. So main characters are protesting this idea. I appeal to the chasseur, determined to keep a level head despite the panic clawing up my throat. You can't want this. Please tell him to find another way. There is no other way, the archbishop interjected. Is there though? Was there really no other way that we could have found a solution to clear up this misunderstanding? I could kind of believe that maybe people would be cool with him beating his wife because, I mean, people already don't care about women today, but like back then it was way worse. The church is very patriarchal and sexist. Maybe this is realistic to their attitude towards things, but I cannot believe that the only solution is to marry this disgusting creature that you supposedly hate. Was there really no alternate plan? He didn't even say like plan B, plan C. He just went from 0 to 100. And I'm like, bruh, this is so flimsy and it just doesn't even work. Somehow, both the characters agree to it anyway. Reed is just like, man, I guess I gotta do it to save my reputation. And Lou is just like, man, I guess I'll do it because then I'll be protected by the church. All the people who are trying to hurt me because I'm a witch won't be able to hurt me because I'll be protected now. Bitch, the church literally wants to kill you. That's their whole motto, witches get stitches. How would being close or a part of church be anything remotely close to being safe? You can't even defend yourself with magic without smelling like a bag of farts, okay? Like this just doesn't make sense. And then to make it even more preposterous, the archbishop says that the only way to make this marriage legit is if they consummate. They gotta have sex on the night that they get married or else it's like not official. Of course, the marriage must be consummated to be legally binding. See that is executed quickly. A witness shall visit your room later to confirm. Wait. Why do they have to have sex? If the whole marriage is a sham just to cover up this guy's public image, why does it matter whether he actually has sex with her or not? You're already lying about the whole situation, but you can't lie about them having sex? People aren't gonna know. How are they even gonna verify it? How are you gonna verify it, you fucking pervert? You gonna send over a cuck to their room just to watch them? I have kept a tab of like every what the fuck moment I had while reading it, because it just wouldn't stop. For the longest time, I procrastinated on filming this video. At some point, I even contemplated not filming this video at all because I'm like, man, this is too much brain power for me. But then I got an email from a sponsor and then I was like, shh. Shit. So now, here we are. You should really thank NordVPN for sponsoring this because I probably would have put off filming it forever. If you don't know what a VPN is, it's a private and secure way that you can access the internet without anybody tracking your data or seeing your browsing history. You can also change your IP address so that it looks like you are using the internet from a completely different country, which is really nice if you had Netflix because sometimes they only have shows in like specific countries. NordVPN is the one that I'm most familiar with because they actually won a couple of awards last year for being like the best VPN. They have over 5,000 servers in 60 countries. They have 24/7 customer support. They have up to 6 simultaneous connections. And even if you go to like a public place, like an airport or a coffee shop, they'll still protect your data. They actually do double data encryption just so that you can really make sure that you're anonymous. If you're not into it, you can still get your money back in 30 days guarantee. They really know their shit, so I'm gonna put a link and a coupon code in my description so that you can get 70% off of your subscription plus an additional month that is completely free. You can check it out at nordvpn.com/readwithcindy and use my coupon code readwithcindy. So we finished part 1 of this book. And then we get to part 2, the consummation. They don't want to do it. They're put in this bedroom. It's hella awkward. Reed takes a step closer to Lou and she's like, don't fucking touch me. I refuse to ever let you touch me with your giant manly hands and your perfectly chiseled dick. You hot hottie. Fucking disgusting. He's like, well, it's not like I want to do it either, especially with a heathen like you. She's like, that doesn't matter because I got a plan. She takes out a knife and she just slits her arm and bleeds all over the bed sheets. And he's like, oh my God, what are you doing? And she's like, this is proof that we did it. So that when the cuck comes upstairs and sees our bed, he's gonna see blood all over the sheets and assume that we smang. And she says all of this super chill while she just casually bleeds all over the place. I'm like, listen, this is pretty excessive. You're having sex, not a bloodbath. Also, when you have sex, you shouldn't even be bleeding. It doesn't matter if it's your first time or not. That is a complete myth. But even if you do bleed from vaginal tearing or whatever, it would just be like a little bit of blood. The way that she just drenched the bed in blood just makes it seem like he has a massive dick that destroyed her, and now the church has a whole nother problem. It's just not a very subtle solution at all. I'm pretty sure the whole point of this scene, or even forcing them to consummate in the first place, is to show off how badass Lou is, because you see her willingly cut herself and be totally unfazed and be able to get out of the situation of giving up her body to a guy. And on one hand, this is so overstated and dramatic, but on the other hand, it was, dare I say it, kind of savage, so I'll give her that. Throughout the marriage, Reed keeps on calling Lou a creature and a heathen and treating her like a feral animal, and she kind of relishes in it, and she'll go out of her way to be super loud and crass just to turn him off because she's not like a proper lady. Hashtag feminism, I guess. But this is also contrasted by a girl that Reed is actually in love with named Celie. She is the perfect image of a woman because she's very pure and graceful and feminine. She's the perfect woman. He practically salivates for her because he's like, oh my God, celibate Celie. Literally her only personality trait. She's just there so that the main girl looks extra rough around the edges. I was hyping myself up because I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe this bitch is evil. Maybe she's gonna betray him. Maybe she's in cahoots with the archbishop because she knows like a darker secret to the plot that we're not aware of. Because she's way too perfect, so there's gotta be more to her character. But she literally did nothing in the story besides being like the ex, and I'm like, why was this bitch even here? You could have replaced her with a wet towel and there wouldn't have been a goddamn difference. Except maybe the towel, is actually wet and Celia's gotta stay celibate. While we're on the topic of side characters, I want to point out that the only black character in this book is Lou's best friend, who is named Coco. Why is a black witch named Coco? Is there an Asian witch named Dim Sum? I guess it could have been worse. I mean, there could have been an Asian witch named Cho Chang. Wait. You could argue that she gets away with having a name like that because Coco is technically a French name, and this whole book takes place in medieval France, and the author really wants to emphasize that by the way that she names characters. There's a baker named Pan, which means bread in French. I'm so glad that this person's name is Pan. Otherwise, I would have never known that they were a French baker. The weird thing is, despite it taking place in medieval France, every now and then, there's like inconsistencies with the writing. Things will suddenly be described in modern slang. One character describes another character as having a tight little ass. Excuse me? This is medieval France. It's not little ass. is petite ass with the accent mark. Get it right. Respect the world building. Here's another horrible revelation that I had. I was buddy reading it with Jacob from Alchemy Reads, and I didn't say this to him at the time because I didn't want to taint the experience by speaking it into existence. But while reading this book, I was really reminded of Sarah J. Maas. A lot of the writing style and how melodramatic things are described and how extra the characters were reminded me of her Court of Thorns and Roses series. But every time I thought that, I just pushed it to the back of my mind and I was like, no, I'm just overthinking it. That period of me reading Sarah J. Maas books is over. I'm done with her. I don't have to relive anything from her ever again. But then at some point while we're buddy reading, Jacob tells me, you know, it really makes sense why Sarah J. Maas loves this book. And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? He's like, yeah, she gave a blurb for the book. I look at my library book cover, a brilliant debut full of everything I love. I never really got to see who said it because as you can see, there is a library sticker on the book cover because the San Francisco Public Library for some reason hates me. So I'm just like, wait a minute. I go onto Google, image search. I type Serpent Dove book cover. I blow up the image to the very top and that's when I fucking see it. The person who said that this book had everything that she loved No! People have been asking me to read Throne of Glass, to read Crescent City, whatever other books this person has written. Every time I'm like, no, I'm not gonna read any more of her books. From now on, I'm reading other books that are different. And it turns out, I'm the goddamn fool that played myself. I know that people think that the fact that I exclusively read library books is like some kind of political statement where I'm like anti-capitalist and I'm advocating for public libraries. Don't believe it. I don't. I'm anti-library now. And then later on, an Instagram follower pointed out to me that this author's favorite book is A Court of Mist and Fury. And I'm like, at this point, you bitches are fucking pulling my leg. But she sends a screenshot of this author's Goodreads profile. There's no escape. I cannot escape this. I've tried, but it always comes haunting me back. But you know what? If anything, I would say this is a compliment to the author of this book. Because if she really likes Sarah J. Maas books, and I was reminded of those books while reading this one, that should be like a good thing for her, right? I'm kind of proud of her for being able to emanate the books that she really likes. Sarah J. Maas even endorsed her book. That's pretty incredible. It's like she could smell the problematic love story and she started salivating. That's sisters supporting sisters in solidarity. Shelby, the author, is the real winner here. And I'm just a fucking loser. I wish I could just end this video, but there's so much more that happens. After they marry and consummate, they put Lou in a prison because she's not allowed to go anywhere. Reed gets a soldier to stand guard and make sure that she doesn't do anything sketchy or escapes. This soldier is a 16-year-old boy named Ansel. She tries to tease Reed a little bit by implying that she will seduce this 16-year-old boy. Ooh, I waggled my brows, grinning. A bit young, isn't he? I like them young though. Easier to train that way. Perhaps I'll give him his first kiss. No, I'll do him one better. I'll give him his first fuck. Ma'am, I'm this close to calling Chris Hansen. So Ansel becomes her chaperone, who is meant to keep her trapped in the tower so that she doesn't go anywhere. But she's able to get him to let her go outside pretty much almost instantly. And the way that she was able to convince him was by loudly singing a song called Big Titty Liddy. Big Titty Liddy was not very pretty, but her bosom was big as a barn, I sang. Her creamery knockers drove men off their rockers, but she was blind to their charms. Stop! His face burned so vivid a scarlet it rivaled my husband's. What are you doing? That's indecent. They have a little back and forth, but she still keeps on singing. Big Willy Billy talks sort of silly, I bellowed, but his knob was long as his... Stop, stop. Ansel waved his hands, cheeks flaming anew. I'll take you on a tour. Just please, please stop singing about that. And that's how she was able to get out. If the solution to get out of a bad situation was to be fucking annoying and loudly sing about big titties and trying to be funny when you're not even funny, I would have conquered the whole world by now. Every time she sang this stupid song, and she sang it so many times, multiple times throughout this book, I cringed so much. I knew that the author was trying to go for some comic relief, but it wasn't funny. It was just very embarrassing. And now I know how people feel when they watch my videos, and it is not a good feeling. I don't like it when the tables turn like this. What I've noticed from individuals who didn't like this book was that they still felt like Ansel was like a redeeming factor in the story because he's just so like sweet and innocent. And I'm like, no. Fuck Ansel. He's a dumbass. He's terrible at his job. He only had one job to do, and he caved in because his prisoner sang a song about titties. I would never trust him to protect me or do anything or be remotely competent at all. Speaking of immaturity, there is this one part where the Archbishop is talking to the public and he's being very annoying. So to get kind of like a little bit of revenge on him, Lou decides to pull a prank on him. She decides to risk exposing herself by using magic to make him fart in front of a whole crowd. It's very loud. They all hear it. He's super embarrassed and she's just snickering in the corner. Reed is there and he's like, oh, what is that smell? Huh, so weird. And it's just like a funny little comic relief scene. Ha ha ha, so funny. Here's what I'm wondering though. If witches give off a smell whenever they use magic, and she can clearly make somebody fart by command, couldn't they also try to make other people fart whenever they use magic to cover up the smell and distract people? Like, what if every time you use magic, you make another person fart and that'll cover up the smell, and that way no one's gonna suspect you of being a witch because they're too distracted by the stinky doo-doo? Like, why doesn't she take more advantage of this beyond like a silly little prank? I just think that if you're gonna expand your magic system to make other people fart, you really gotta go in on this. But the whole smell thing really doesn't seem to be a problem for her because throughout the book, she constantly uses her magic and nobody like connects the dots. Everyone's just like, man, what's that smell? But then they never assume that it's her. And I'm like, huh? You already suspect her of being a heathen and an intruder, and she's clearly not trustworthy. And you know that she is friends with other witches, but you don't make the connection. For some reason, this totally goes over their heads, and then they just ignore the smell and move on, which is completely unrealistic because I know that bitch is stanky. Comment below with an answer. If you were a witch and you put out a smell every time you use magic, what do you think your smell would be? I think mine would be hot Cheetos because that's been my main diet recently. Anyway, without Lou, this book would have been easily cut in half because we would just lose all the dialogue of her hitting on a 16-year-old boy and being crass and unladylike in the name of feminism. Now, a part that's foreshadowing their relationship, and by foreshadowing I mean it just smacks you in the face, is a part where Reed gives her a book that he really likes. It's tastefully done. The characters are from warring kingdoms, but they're forced to work together when they uncover a plot to destroy the world. They loathe each other initially, but in time, they're able to set aside their differences. First of all, this sounds like the most generic ass book ever. Second of all, this is another example of why everything is so on the nose. Because you're reading this, you're like, oh my God, this fictional story that he's reading parallels the actual situation that's going on between the two of them. So it's like art becomes reality. And third of all, if he likes the book's theme so much, why doesn't he have the same thinking for his church and the witches? This story is so on the nose that it's like, how have you not actually comprehended the book's themes? How are you going to call yourself a reader, but you can't even take the events of a book and see how it applies to the real world? But then I also remember that people in the book community read all sorts of books about like empathy and acceptance and different viewpoints, and they still can't even follow that in their own life. So I don't know, maybe that's not a stretch. Reed is like a booktuber that's always advocating for diversity in books, but then you watch his vlogs and you realize that he only hangs out with white people. Also, I like how we are supposed to fawn over Reed being overprotective of Lou now that she's his wife. Throughout the book, he constantly says that he's gonna take care of her, and you can tell that it's like a moment where the reader's like, ooh, so sweet, so chivalrous. But I'm like, bruh, he's literally just saying this stuff because she's his wife and therefore his property, and that's the whole basis of why he feels responsible to look after her. We love a man who's chivalrous. I was looking forward to seeing how the relationship would develop because I was curious on how they would end up falling for each other. How are they going to bridge the gap between their differences and learn to be together? That's kind of like the intrigue of enemies to lovers. So this happens in the middle portion of the book as they get to hang out more because Ansel keeps on letting Lou out because he's a dumbass. And so that's how they're able to spend more time together. There's a chapter where they go out together on this date. This is a part that is meant to really show them bonding and really getting to know each other. And the way that this ended up being executed was that they started asking each other a bunch of questions like it was speed dating. Let's make a game of it, shall we? A game of questions to get to know each other. I lean forward to returning the challenge. Let's. Fine. What's your favorite color? Blue. She rolled her eyes. Boring, mine's gold, or turquoise, or emerald. What's the most embarrassing thing you've ever done? And then it goes on like that where they share their most embarrassing stories. And then she's like, biggest pet peeve? Swearing. Killjoys. Favorite food? Venison. Sticky buns. Best friend? John Luke. Mine is Brie. Fatal flaw? Selfishness. Wrath. Greatest fear? Death. Bruh, are we really doing all these rapid fire questions like we're filling out a profile on OkCupid? All this time, I was wondering how the two would end up falling in love with each other and overcoming their prejudice. But it turns out that all they really had to do was play 20 questions. But I guess it does work out because obviously they start falling for each other. Towards the end, Lou is just like, man, you know what? Even though he's literally killing my people, he ain't that bad. There's a line where it says, whatever Reed was, he wasn't a blue pig. So Lou is over here really going like, you know what? Hashtag Blue Lives Matter. I guess it's for the best because when they actually do try to have like a real conversation, it is so strange and I'm just like, what am I even reading? There's a scene where Reed keeps on calling the witches it. Lou replies to correct him and say that it's she. Reed replies, they're not women, so they're it. Lou replies, witches can give birth, which means they're women. All right. Reed replies, witches only give birth to other witches, so they're basically asexual. What the fuck are you guys talking about? Listen, that entire conversation is way too much to unpack, so I'm not even gonna touch it. What I will say is that later on in the book, after the big reveal about her being a witch and him feeling betrayed, there's a character that's talking to Reed while he's acting all angsty. Ansel is telling him, you know, maybe she's not that bad after all. But Reed is not having it. And he says, all she's ever done is lie to me, Ansel. She looked me in the eyes and told me she loved me. How do I know that wasn't a lie too? It wasn't a lie. You know it wasn't. He paused, lifting his chin in a gesture so like Lou I nearly wept. You... ... You called her she, not it. Oh my God, it's so sweet because he finally calls her by her proper pronouns instead of dehumanizing her. And they say chivalry is dead. Let's talk about how Lou gets exposed as a witch. This happens towards the end of the book, and not only is she revealed to be a witch, it also turns out that the Archbishop is actually her father. Now that's a juicy plot twist. You could argue that now it kind of makes sense why he forced them into marriage because it was all part of his plan, but I still stand by my statement that it was not necessary for him to force them to consummate. If anything, that just makes it worse. You're her father, but then you tried to force her to have sex with him, and then you also insisted on verifying for proof whether she did. You know what? I'm not even gonna get into that. There's too many damn things to unpack in this book, but this is not an analytical video, okay? I'm just here to provide commentary with the last two of my brain cells, and you can just make what you will from it. This plot twist gets revealed when a band of witches come strolling around in the city on this wagon. They dance and they perform and they put on a skit. This skit talks about the Archbishop and explains the whole background story of how Lou was born and why she ran away from the coven, because it turns out she is meant to be this big sacrifice because her mother is like the leader of the witches and she's looking to kill her child. One of my pet peeves in the book is when there is an info dump to just explain the entire background story. But this was a whole other level because it was an info dump reenacted through a skit. And I was like, damn, how convenient that a band of witches decided to come through the city and just reenact everything that you need to know. It was like Spark Notes, but make it a musical. And then there's another part that happens towards the end of the book, and this was a very, very intense action scene at the end of the story. This is the climax of it. People are getting hurt. Characters are screaming each other's names because they're in danger. Lou, I said through clenched teeth, but a high-pitched scream silenced my argument. I spun just as Coco collapsed to the floor. She didn't get back up. Coco, Lou screamed. Chaos erupted. The witches surged forward, but Ansel rose up to meet them, a lone figure against hundreds. To my dismay, Bo followed him, but he didn't brandish a weapon. Instead, he shucked off his coat and boots, searching the crowd wildly. When his eyes landed on the plump witch from the hall, he pointed and bellowed, "Big Titty Liddy!" Her eyes widened as he kicked off his pants and began singing at the top of his lungs. Big Titty Liddy was not very pretty, but her bosom was big as a barn. The witches nearest him, Eleanor and Elena among them, stopped dead in their tracks. Bewilderment tempered their rage as Bo slipped his shirt over his head and continued singing. Her creamery knockers drove men off their rockers, but she was blind to their charms. So you're telling me that a gang of witches who are about to kill you were able to be stopped because someone took off their clothes and started singing Big Titty Liddy. Even when he sang the song, it was in all caps here. So it was just smacking you in the face with this goddamn song. And I was like, oh my God, I can't get this a good rating. I just can't. You can tell that this is a debut novel because the author's humor really doesn't land well or is being balanced properly with the serious stuff. This just isn't meshed well together at all, especially when you use a stupid ass song to completely diffuse a situation that's supposed to be very intense. It's supposed to be one of the most important scenes in the book because this is the final action and the climax. But everything is just so juvenile, from the humor and even the way the prejudice is portrayed. It's just so in your face and cartoonish that I just cringe so much. You could argue that it's okay to be a little juvenile because this is a YA book. I could kind of get that because maybe the threshold is a little bit different for younger audiences. Maybe they'll actually think it's funny, but you can't get away with making such childish jokes that appeal to children in the same book that has a graphic sex scene. There is a graphic sex scene, which proves to me that this is not actually young adult. This is new adult because there are mature scenes that happen even though the writing is so immature. But you know what? Even though the sex scene was completely inappropriate for young adults, I gotta say, it was my favorite scene in the book. When I talked about this in my wrap up, I was like, damn, this book is terrible, but I'll tell you what, that sex scene, best scene in the book. I really enjoyed reading it. 10 out of 10 would do again, just like them. I got a comment on that video saying, wow, I gotta read the sex scene to see why it's so impressive. And I'm like, okay, listen, I didn't like the sex scene because it was well written or revolutionary or innovative. I just liked it because I'm a pervert. So just wanted to clarify that. All this time, the archbishop and the church constantly preach about purity and not succumbing to the sins of sex. And I was like, damn, you know what? I really want to see Reed get tempted by the lady's physical wiles. I want to see him succumb to everything that this priest has been kink-shaming him for. I know it's building up and I want to see it blow up. And then we got it, baby. We fucking got it. Let's read it together, shall we? By the way, fun fact, apparently my coworker and her husband watched my videos on the big TV in their house. She sent me a picture the other day when she found her husband taking care of their newborn baby and they were watching one of my videos. The sad thing is, this isn't the first time someone sent me a photo of their baby watching my videos. I don't know how else to say this, but stop making your babies watch my videos. That's not good for the baby's development. Like, that messes up their brain when they're exposed to that at such an early age. I'm just saying, I don't know, be responsible, okay? Anyway, let's read the sex scene together. I wanted him to touch me. I wanted him to become my husband in every sense of the word. I wanted him, all of him. Touch me, Reed. To my surprise, the words came out steady despite my breathlessness. Please touch me. His tongue moved slowly, worshiping me with each stroke, and I practically combusted. Combusted? Lou is supposed to be the one with the experience, and Reed is supposed to be the one that's a virgin, so why is she the one exploding? Fine. My traitorous neck extended under his mouth, but my pride refused to succumb so easily. If he wanted to play one more game, I would oblige him, and I would win. Would you, oh brave and virtuous chasseur, stick your tongue down my throat and your hands up my skirt? My ass needs grabbing. He spluttered and reared back incredulously. I arched against him, grinning despite myself. Too much? Nah, I read about fairy dicks, so we're chilling. There was something in his gaze as he looked at me. Something hesitant, something almost self-conscious that made me pause. His hands trembled slightly where they clutched me, and his chest rose and fell in rapid succession. He was nervous. No. Terrified. It took only a second for understanding to rush in. Reed really was a virtuous chasseur, a holy chasseur. Reed had never had sex. He was a virgin. Oh, that's why he's nervous, because it's his first time. So cute. It's okay. You can still be holy, just not the kind of holy you were thinking about. Slowly, purposefully, I shifted in his lap, taking his face in both my hands. Let me show you. His eyes darkened as I straddled him. My skirt slid up at the movement, the wind tickling my bare legs, but I didn't feel the cold. There was only Reed. I watched his throat bob, heard his breath hitch. His eyes darted to mine in a question when I pulled his hands to the lacings on my dress. I nodded, and he carefully pulled. Despite the chill, his fingers were competent. So even though he's a buff virgin, he has a fast learning curve. And might I remind you, he's very buff, so that means he has the strength and stamina to keep up with her and do all sorts of positions with her. This is the kind of dynamic that we're working with here. We good. We real good. My man's about to blow. I'm ready for it. He tried to increase my speed, his hands desperate, insistent, but I resisted, pressing myself flush against his chest and biting the sensitive spot where his neck met his shoulder. He jerked, and another low groan escaped his lips. This is how you touch a woman. I pressed into him harder for emphasis, grabbing his hand and bringing it between my legs. This is how you touch me. He's gonna find the clit. I know he is. I believe in him. This is the true quest that we've been waiting for in this fantasy book. Sexy times continue on for a couple of pages. I'm just gonna skip a little bit and jump to my favorite part. He bent forward abruptly and took my breast in his mouth, and I gasped. His tongue was hot, demanding. A deep, delicious ache built too quickly in my belly. God, Reed! At the sound of his name, he bit down lightly. I shattered completely, lost in the pleasure and pain. You telling me that this virgin just bit into her titty, and just from that she came? Now that's what I call big titty Liddy. This is the kind of shit that I'm talking about. If we had these scenes consistently throughout the book, I swear to God, I swear on my big titty Liddy, I would have rated this shit 5 stars, and I wouldn't give a fuck whether it was problematic or not. I am sick of these authors trying to muddle their books with a plot. Listen, you gotta embrace your strengths. Not everyone is gonna be good at plot. Not everyone is good at developing characters. Not everyone is good at stringing together a cohesive narrative that makes sense. That's okay. That's okay. Sometimes you just want to suck on a titty and call it a day. That's all I want. That's all I want. By the way, Danny and Greg, if you're watching this, I just want to say congratulations on your newborn baby. I don't think I ever really got to congratulate you on it. Now that we're here, I figured I might as well just say it. But yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out. So, all right, I'm going to end this video here. There's a lot of valid points that I could have made about this book and critiquing it, like the fact that loose feminism requires overvaluing patriarchy, or the lack of gray morality between the two opposing sides, or the patriarchal oppression of religious institutions and the way that it has impacted both men and women. But I'm just here to talk about titties, and I've done my part. I am signing off. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this big titty Liddy video. I hope you unsubscribe from my channel and subscribe to NordVPN instead. They kind of need it after giving money to this bullshit. And if you are interested in a fantasy enemies to lovers story, I really enjoyed To Kill a Kingdom. I talked about this book in previous videos before, but because I know that a lot of people only watch my negative videos and then complain that I only read books that I hate, they probably have missed it. This is one of the many books that I actually do like. I liked the couple here, I liked the banter here, and the hate to love progression was done more naturally in my opinion. So you can check it out if you want to. Honestly, you can even check out Serpent and Dove if you want to. A lot of people really did like this book. Take care of your big titties and goodbye.
Fire, water, ice burning.